just arrived in the colonies because there was some bitching over a tiny 3% tax. Not that big a deal, but whatever, this shit'll be easy.
What the actual fuck? Where the hell are they? Unless they're lined up 10 feet in front of me wearing bright blue uniforms, I can't see them. These guys are such assholes. What kind of a dickhead doesn't line up in a straight line and patiently take turns shooting one another?
Sir, these colonials are worse than gonorrhea. They hide behind trees and pick us off while we pass through single file wearing bright red. And you would know, Corporal, even though we're the superpower of the world, we still don't know how to counter this ingenious tactic of hiding behind trees.
God damn, we've been here 8 years and are just getting our shit pushed in. These boys weren't kidding, they really do hate taxes.
Okay, this is our last stand. We may have a chance if we just... Nope. Shit. Never mind, those ass-smelling French are here. I'm here in place of Cornwallis, because apparently he's really sick today, to deliver terms of surrender to that giant stud right there.
Happy 4th of July, a little prematurely, everybody. Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, or as we like to call it, the Tri-F Podcast, where we try not to mess the podcast up. So, Trevor and Cody were not able to make it today, and so we've had to do a little bit of scrambling. Fortunately, the Senate had a congressional hearing, and since I wasn't able to do a lot of research, and I didn't just want to react to something fresh out of hand tonight, therefore I figured the best thing to do would be to basically react to one of these congressional hearings, like what we did last time with the alien situation, whenever the... oh man, this is going to be a long one. Whenever the... Congress decided to pretend like there were actually aliens because, I don't know, probably Hunter Biden or somebody had done something. Anyway, this one's going to be a little more substantive, I believe, because we were talking about the shot that should not be named. And so, we're going to talk about apparently, according to this brief description here, they're going to talk about the medical findings, or what actually happened with the congressional hearings. Or what actually happened with the shot heard around the world, let's say. So let's, I don't know how this is going to go tonight. We're just going to react to what we hear, and I don't know if we'll go through the whole thing or not, but we'll try our best, and hopefully we'll still have a good show for y'all. So let's just get into it.
This hearing of the Permanent Subcommittee Investigations will come to order. I want to welcome everybody here. I appreciate your attendance in the audience. I certainly appreciate the time and effort that witnesses put into their testimony and their time coming here, traveling, and spending the afternoon with us. I would like to welcome Ranking Member Blumenthal, all the members, new and old. Senator Kim, thanks for showing up. To this, the first hearing of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations in the 119th Congress. I look forward to working with all of you as we conduct oversight investigations to uncover and expose the truth on issues that are important to the American people. My hope is our work will be largely nonpartisan. And I use that word specifically, nonpartisan. There should be nothing partisan about revealing the truth. That was this subcommittee's experience in the last Congress under Chairman Blumenthal, as we conducted bipartisan investigations into the assassination attempts on President Trump and the Coast Guard's cover-up of sexual abuse, and attempted to obtain information the government has withheld from the 9/11 families. In addition to the subcommittee's bipartisan record, its reputation for conducting thorough investigations spans decades. Since the 1940s, this subcommittee has been the epicenter of major congressional oversight efforts. I hope to use the subcommittee to build on that legacy by bringing much-needed transparency to the public, revealing the truth, and exposing wrongdoing. But it won't be easy. Wrongdoers are very good at covering their tracks, and we are already aware of allegations.
Did I have my microphone down when I said that? I did. I am an idiot. This is going to be a long night. That's okay. So as I was saying, if the media calls it a conspiracy theory, it's fair game. That's pretty much the point of that spiel I just said a second ago. So with that said, we'll move on.
Suggesting document destruction and purposeful evasion of FOIA. Quick little aside, I do want to tell members that, and members of the audience, this is not going to be a standard U.S. Senate hearing. I think it'll start out that way, but I was here early enough on the subcommittee with Senator Levin, for example. And Senator Levin would come with binders like we have of over 2,000 documents. But that was just his binder for the hearing, and they'd go all day long. This is about thorough investigation to uncover the truth. So again, I'm going to encourage the members. We'll have timing on the first round of questions, but if it's apparent that you're interested in this, if it's apparent that you've listened to the testimony, read the testimony, and you have more probing questions, I'll allow time to do it. Now, it'll be at my discretion, but I'll be, I think, very generous to serious types of questions. Now, the title of today's hearing is "The Corruption of Science in Federal Health Agencies: How Health Officials Downplayed and Hid Myocarditis and Other Adverse Events Associated with the COVID-19 Vaccines." I also want to take a moment to apologize, particularly to the vaccine injured, because I know there was an awful lot of expectation that as soon as I obtained this chairmanship that we'd be holding hearings immediately in January and February, and that was what my hope was. It didn't pan out that way because as dedicated as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is to radical transparency in HHS, that's hard to achieve. And so it still has been difficult to get the documents. I think we finally got enough documents to certainly demonstrate in this case with myocarditis that the federal government was well aware of it, downplayed the severity, and hid what they had actually found. So again, that's what this hearing is about. That's what the report that we're issuing in conjunction with this hearing is about. As chairman of the full committee, I held multiple hearings in the first year of the pandemic that opened my eyes to the capture and corruption of federal health agencies and scientific research. So much of our miserably failed response to COVID made no sense. Masking, devastating shutdowns.
I'm a professional, everybody.
Rapid approval of remdesivir, and the maniacal reliance on the COVID-19 injections. I use that word purposefully as well. Injections, they're not standard vaccines, as the only way to end the pandemic. As ranking member of this subcommittee, I was unable to interest the subcommittee or full committee chairs in joining my oversight of our pandemic response. So instead of formal hearings, I held public events, giving those injured by the COVID-19 injection a platform to appeal to federal health officials and the public for help. I also provided opportunities for eminently qualified doctors and medical researchers who disagreed with our pandemic response to offer second opinions. More often than not, those who spoke up were vilified, censored, and suffered various forms of retribution and retaliation. Fortunately, the retaliation did not deter them, and they continued to speak out. Even better, they were joined by others. Some of those individuals are testifying today or are in the audience. I want to personally thank them for their courage and persistence. Today, I'm releasing an interim report that is based in large part on documents that were obtained by individuals who filed Freedom of Information FOIA requests over the last several years. These documents, obtained by reporters and private citizens, contain heavy redactions applied by the Biden administration. Yet, despite these obstructive efforts, these individuals initially raised awareness of Biden's administration's failure to immediately warn the public about myocarditis and other serious adverse events linked to the COVID-19 injections. I want to today credit the tenacious reporting of Brenda Bellotti, Ed Berkovich, Brian Hooker, Amy Kelly, Zachary Stieber, and Naomi Wolf. I know this hearing in particular was based on what we saw in the Pfizer papers and the 17-page talking points memo we'll talk about later. And again, that was the good work of Naomi Wolf and Amy Kelly and their crowdsourcing of the Pfizer papers. How do you go through millions of pages? But I also want to thank the individuals associated with React 19, the Informed Consent Action Network, ICANN, the book, The Pfizer Papers, as well as the reporters at Epoch Times, The Defender, Just the News, The Daily Cloud, and many others who work persistently to expose the truth. Now, I actually have quite a bit longer opening statement, which I'll ask to be entered in the record. But what I want to do right now is, in a more succinct fashion, go through a abbreviated timeline as it relates to the myocarditis issue. Now, after facing 4 years of the Biden administration's efforts to undermine the public's access to information in my oversight work, I immediately issued a subpoena to HHS when I became chairman of this committee. The subpoena records I am releasing today, which are discussed in the interim report, do not contain FOIA redactions and will finally provide the public a more complete understanding of the Biden administration's awareness of the risks of myocarditis following COVID-19 injection. So now here's a brief timeline.
Hey, there's an ad, everybody. Aren't you so happy we got an ad?
On February 28, 2021, Israeli health officials notified CDC, quote, of large reports of myocarditis, particularly in young people following the administration of the Pfizer vaccine. Again, that's February 28, 2021, 2.5 months after the emergency use authorization. On April 12th, over a month later, a DOD consultant raises concerns to CDC and FDA officials about their ability to monitor and track cardiac-related adverse events. The consultant notes, quote, if you do not ask, you will not see it. But does that mean it does not exist, unquote. Around the same time, in mid-April 2021, CDC officials discussed safety signals for myocarditis, quote, for myocarditis with mRNA vaccines, based on DOD and Israeli data, but do not take immediate steps to warn the public. By the end of April 2021, just 4 months into the COVID injection, VAERS was already reporting 2,926 deaths worldwide within 30 days of injection, with 46% of those deaths occurring on days 0, 1, or 2 following injection. Now, I have the first chart I ever did on this, which I presented in our event in Milwaukee with the COVID injection injured. That chart, a couple months later, is showing, I think, 30-some%. I can't see it from that far away, but let me get out mine. That chart is showing, at that time, a couple months later, 4,812 deaths, 1,736, or 36% of those deaths occurring within the day of injection or within 1 or 2 days. Now, I was raising that issue. I was going on media. I was showing this chart, and I got censored. Radio talk show hosts, when I talked about this, they were deplatformed. Now, again, I realize VAERS doesn't prove causation. I realize it's grossly underreported, but that's a correlation that I thought was pretty important. Somebody ought to be looking at it. So when I finally had a meeting with Francis Collins, head of NIH, with a group of other senators, I asked him, are you watching VAERS? I gave him those stats.
There we go.
He did admit that 6 deaths were associated with the J&J
way too long
vaccine,
to figure that
but
out.
for the other over a few thousand deaths, he said, Senator, people die. That was his callous reaction. That was the head of the NIH. Completely
And somebody who touts his faith nonstop, by the way. For those who don't know, Francis Collins is famous for writing, let's see, what was the book? I believe it was called The Language of God. Let me Google that really quick. Yep, Francis Collins. So there's the charming sucker right there. Yep. There's his book, Language of God. Yep. So he's always been one of these guys that touts himself as a theistic evolutionist, one of those Christian guys. And yet, this charming individual was like, well, people die. Wonderful individual, wonderful human being. Really sets the standard of behavior there.
Blowing off the VAERS system that they had touted before they got the emergency use authorization. I'll continue. From May 17th to May 21, 2021, CDC officials discussed whether to issue a formal health warning called a Health Alert Network message on myocarditis, noting that, quote, providers aren't reporting these cases to VAERS. They knew they weren't. They knew they existed. They knew they weren't reporting them. A couple days later, during a May 24, 2021 vaccine safety meeting, notes show that FDA and CDC officials asked, quote, is VAERS signaling for myopericarditis now? Question mark, and are told for the age groups 16 to 17 years and 18 to 24 years, yes. Yes, they saw a safety signal in VAERS, yet. From May 25th to May 27th, CDC officials provide up-to-date information on the status of the Han to Pfizer and Moderna representatives. Not to the public, they're warning the injection manufacturers. indicating CDC's preference to keep those companies more informed about vaccine adverse events than the American people. On May 26th, then FDA Director, Acting Commissioner Janet Woodcock emails then CDC Director Rochelle Walensky noting that, quote, FDA does not concur with the issuance of the myocarditis HAN as written. The same day, CDC and FDA decide to, quote, nix the HAN and instead publish less formal clinical, quote, clinical considerations about myocarditis on CDC website. 3 days following the myopericarditis signal, FDA official Peter Marks appears to raise concerns about even posting the less formal clinical considerations on CDC's website. He emails Woodcock and Walensky, quote, I need to ask for your patience with me. We still have concerns here if myocarditis and pericarditis have not actually signaled. That same day, CDC officials editing the clinical considerations discussed the need to, quote, walk back a sentence advising doctors to, quote, consider restricting patients with myocarditis from rigorous activity like competitive sports for at least 3 months until cleared by healthcare professionals. And I'll be talking to Dr. McCulloch about the danger of eliminating that warning because 4 days later, CDC posts on its website clinical considerations about myocarditis, which omits any advice to doctors to advise patients with myocarditis to limit rigorous activity. That's what's in this report in far greater detail. So I would ask that that information, together with my majority staff report, 2,473 pages of records HHS has produced pursuant to my January 28, 25 subpoena, and my actual subpoena. I want those entered into the record. And with that, I'll turn over to Ranking Member Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having this first hearing of our Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. I think we all agree that this hearing and our efforts in this subcommittee ought to be nonpartisan and non-political, and that we should depoliticize science.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Strictly adhere to the evidence, medical evidence, without resort to ideological predilection.
Oh, how are you going to do that?
And that there ought to be warnings about side effects.
You know, a lot of these guys in this medical field are eugenicists, and they believe that we should get rid of all the useless eaters. That's a political ideology. So how are you supposed to depoliticize science exactly? Just food for thought. In a world where MAID is actually a program in Canada, how are you supposed to depoliticize science? It's a wonderful dream, but curious as to how you intend to do that.
From any medicine, and that the warning should be as prompt as possible. I think we can all agree on that fact, and that there ought to be very rigorous review of any kind of medical treatment by the FDA to make sure it's safe and effective before it's used in the public. But I want to take us back to January of 2021. I know it's hard to recall the sense of real
And I guess
fear.
I should clarify, I do appreciate these guys at least having the meeting. The meeting certainly needed to be had, but these appeals to depoliticizing things, the whole point of this meeting is to show that there was a political angle all along, and they were hiding behind science. So how do you remove the political nature of the science, as it were, when we've clearly shown that when the chips are down and it really matters, that's all but impossible because people default to their politics and their ideologies, let's say, under pressure. So kudos for having the meeting. I just think that's a vain sentiment.
During the worst of the pandemic, more than 20,000 Americans died from coronavirus each week. I remember seeing pictures of people who were in the hospital on gurneys because there was inadequate space for them in the hospital. The morgues overflowed. And we were looking to some way to stop the spread and the deep-seated pervasive fear. During the worst week of the pandemic, more than 25,000 Americans died. That was during the last week of President Trump's term of office. Not only were hospitals overwhelmed, but non-urgent procedures were postponed, and doctors and nurses were working around the clock, in fact, putting themselves at risk. Those healthcare providers, to this day, are among my heroes in this story.
Are they?
As patients filled the hallways. As we talk about the side effects of COVID vaccines, I think we need to be clear about the most important.
You do realize those guys were, killing people and calling it COVID, right? There's like lawsuits out over that right now, which is part of the reason for this hearing. So yes, most of them were good, I'm sure, but there were plenty of bad actors too. So, and hence this is a necessity. Hence the reason this is a necessity. So, it's not a bad sentiment, I don't guess, but this whole qualifier after qualifier after qualifier, it just screams, I'm neutral. I don't have a dog in this fight. This isn't a witch hunt. Like, the timidity and the fear, I guess, is what's getting under my skin in these opening statements. These guys committed horrible atrocities and killed millions of people. You shouldn't be approaching this subject with timidity. There should be indignation and outrage. This desire to depoliticize science has already been shown to be a impossibility. So the only thing really left is to hold these people accountable. So let's show a little ire for all the dead rather than being timid and worrying about being perceived as somebody who's going on a witch hunt.
That for all Americans, COVID-19 vaccines have saved millions and millions of lives.
I doubt that.
There is no scientific question about that fact. It saved lives. In the past 5 years, more than 1.2 million Americans have lost their lives to COVID-19. That's 1.2 million parents, children,
Oh, wait,
friends,
no, he's defending
and
the
loved ones.
vaccines. Okay,
And
that
we
makes
all know
sense. I was
someone
getting thrown off.
who has perished.
They don't
as a
have the
result
D and
of
the R in front of
COVID-19.
their name. So
But
that's
when
probably
the vaccine
what he
became
meant by
widely available in
depoliticizing the
2021,
science.
deaths sharply declined, and many lives have been saved in the years since. Many in this room, speaking for myself as well as others, probably have been saved from this disease because of those vaccines. One study found...
I really, really doubt that. And the witnesses are going to contest this fact. So my apologies, everybody. I thought everybody was going to try to play to be neutral. Apparently this dude's a Democrat, but it's hard to tell because doesn't have a D in front of his name, and I don't know the cast of characters on this hearing. Let's see. Blumenthal. I guess that makes sense. Let's see. I'm sure he is a Democrat. Let's see. Was U.S. Senator Blumenthal. Let's just look that up really quick, or I'll look that up really quick on the Google, if you'll permit me. Let's see. Senator Blumenthal. Let's see. Party affiliation, I suppose. He's from Hartford, Connecticut, so I bet I already know the answer. Yep, Democrat Party. Okay, so let that be a lesson. The guy who doesn't want to politicize the science is the guy politicizing the science. So we learned something today. Hooray!
that 3 million American deaths were averted. 18 million hospitalizations were avoided, and $1 trillion in healthcare costs were saved in the United States in just the first 2 years after COVID vaccines
So I was wrong in my opening statement. I need to clarify this, I guess. It's not that he's being timid. He's basically tacitly implying that the guy that just spoke before him, Johnson, Senator Johnson, is on a witch hunt. So when these guys sit there and go, we need to... I didn't realize this guy was a Democrat. That's why I screwed up with the messaging. So rather than trying to pretend like he's not the one on the witch hunt, he's tacitly insulting his fellow senators going, they're on a witch hunt. But me, I'm I'm neutral. I'm the neutral one. See, I think we need to depoliticize the science. And the science clearly says that I'm right, but we're depoliticizing it, though. I'm right, but we're depoliticizing it. It saved 1.2 Americans' lives. Even though this entire conversation is about whether or not it hurt people, it still saved some lives. But I'm depoliticizing it, just so you know.
I'd like this study entered into the record, Mr. Chairman, if there's no objection.
No objection.
Now, vaccines not only saved American lives, they enabled us to get back on our feet economically. They enable the American economy.
We're not back on our feet now.
Recover. Let's try to think of where we were 5 years ago with a deadly, unknown virus spreading through America and through the world. We were only able to come so far because of the vaccines. And the researchers
I was more scared of the Seattle police throwing me in jail than I was of COVID. So, yeah, a few years ago, I was scared of the authorities, not the virus. So just throwing that out there.
who developed them and the public health officials who distribute them. And now those individuals are again under attack, our public health officials. I've looked at those documents, maybe not all of them, that the majority alleges show that the Biden administration or those public health officials suppressed evidence of side effects. Let's be clear, the allegation is that they purposefully concealed evidence. I am unable to support that conclusion with this evidence. In fact,
or your party
the
affiliation.
primary piece of evidence for this
and
claim
the fact that the FBI would probably throw you
is
in jail
that
if you tried.
the CDC did not issue a notice on its Health Alert Network, HAN, in May 2021, while it was still analyzing the evidence about myocarditis. We're talking about myocarditis. The chairman has referenced other side effects. I'm not sure what he means. But what I see
Myocarditis,
as I
it's a
look at
heart
that
attack.
Evidence is public health
What do you mean?
officials wrestling with what to do and what kind of warning to issue. And again, side effects must be studied and communicated. And that's what I see happening in these documents that the majority has released. So we have to distinguish, I think, between differences of opinion under the pressure of a pandemic and separate the opinions of scientists who are working for the greater good and, frankly, others who may simply be seeking to sow distrust while they profit off misinformation and fear. And I'm, frankly, deeply concerned about some of today's witnesses because they have a financial interest in fomenting distrust about COVID-19
So they have a financial
vaccines
interest.
and pushing untested alternative remedies over proven treatments.
Yeah, because
In fact,
alternative
two of today's
remedies are always
witnesses
such a
executives
moneymaker.
at something called the Wellness Company, which sells the disproven treatment,
Oh, disprove.
Ivermectin.
Oh, ivermectin's
And a host
disproven, is it?
untested.
Oh,
supplements,
well, is it
which include
unproven
something
or
called, quote,
untested?
unquote,
Oh,
ultimate
ivermectin doesn't work. Oh, is that a
Costs
fact?
$18.
Is that a fact? Hint,
$89.99
that's incorrect, sir.
a bottle. Another makes money from suing vaccine companies, and still others are pushing unsupported research while rejecting the proven scientists on COVID and other vaccines. Let's be very clear that fear-mongering and rushing to conclusions without examining the evidence can lead to tremendous harm. And this risk is not just hypothetical or rhetorical.
So we're going to depoliticize the
Misinformation about the
science.
safety of vaccines has led
We're
to a
going to
deadly
depoliticize the science by refusing to allow questioning of the institution. I guess that would do it. You would certainly depoliticize the science if everybody's screaming in a monolithic voice, huh? Yeah, that would do it.
outbreak of a preventable disease We all know it, measles. Just 25 years ago, measles was declared eliminated.
I don't know enough about this to speak intelligently, but did you hear the audible groans of indignation in the background? Somebody knows about that topic, and somebody just got very insulted.
In the United States. Since then, conspiracy theories, some financially motivated, have caused vaccination rates to plummet. Last September, the CDC warned that declining childhood vaccination could lead to a resurgence of a preventable disease like measles and rotavirus, exactly what is happening today. As of today, more than 1,000 Americans have been diagnosed with measles this year in 31 states, many of them children. So far, 3 have died. These deaths were preventable. They could have been avoided, but for the efforts of misinformation proponents that have spread lies.
Oh
and
yes,
created
so
fears.
if you have
There
a
has been
different
so much
if you have a
misinformation.
different opinion than me, you've killed people. But I'm depoliticizing the science, guys. I'm the voice of reason. But if you disagree with me, you're a murderer. So yes, way to really calm the temperature there, buddy.
Years since COVID-19 emerged, that during the height of the pandemic, healthcare workers and public health officials were often harassed and threatened. Some of them continue to fear for their lives. During the first frightening year of the pandemic, the Trump administration withheld critical information from the public, made baseless promises that the virus would magically disappear.
I don't think
I'm almost
anybody ever
quoting
said that.
The president magically disappear.
Oh, please play the tape.
In
if that actually
unfounded
happened.
conspiracy theories and sham science about COVID-19 treatments, and sowed the seeds of distrust in public health institutions. And then, to the tremendous credit of President Trump, he fast-tracked the vaccine. Let me repeat, to the credit of the Trump administration, the President of the United States fast-tracked
Which he
the
really
vaccine
shouldn't
and
have done.
saved lives.
I doubt he saved lives.
We need to learn from history. We're seeing the same pattern now. Those same seeds of doubt and distrust have been nurtured by the president's choices for key positions in this administration, including the decision to install a well-known vaccine skeptic as the head of
Oh
HHS
my gosh.
and to fill our public health
So is your
agencies.
historical pattern basically, the historical pattern is my side right, your side wrong? Does it go any deeper than that? I'm just curious.
With conspiracists. And let's bring it right to the present day. Just yesterday, it was announced that the FDA may start restricting access to new COVID boosters to those over
Good.
65 or with a narrow set of pre-existing
Good.
conditions.
They'll
Now,
live.
We ought to be very frank here.
They'll live.
Discerning what exactly this new guidance may be at the moment is confusing. And the troubling news leaves many questions unanswered about whether and how people can actually access vaccines if they want to do so. Will Americans who live with elderly or immunocompromised relatives, for example, have access to these vaccines? We don't know. And so far, those questions are unanswered. The manner and timing of this decision, frankly, reek of politics.
Oh,
not
how so?
science. And again, science ought to be the
Something
lodestar.
other than you disagree with them.
So I think we need to be looking at the present. We need to be looking forward. In the first 4 months since the president took office, he and his health secretary have fired at least 10,000 employees from public health agencies and cut more than $2.7 billion in funding for
That's
research,
fantastic.
including $2 million for vaccine clinical trials. Let me repeat, clinical trials. Money cut to do
They were probably
those.
lying about how those
does that
trials
make
would
us
be done
safer?
anyway.
More than $3.8 million for safety monitoring, and more than $2 billion for state immunization programs. A drastic cut that is already hampering
Given
our
what happened
measles.
of COVID, those programs were clearly ineffective anyway, so it's probably for the better that he got rid of them.
Response. These reckless cuts are undermining our ability to respond, not just to measles, but to what may come next. And we all know something will come next.
Because you'll release it.
That's the history. We need to learn from history and science.
I'm the Fed and I'll do it again.
Let me just finish by saying the capacity of our agencies to warn is compromised by these cuts. The capacity of our agencies to do science and rely on science is compromised when we cut 10,000 people from the ranks of the agencies responsible for safety. And so I welcome the interest in this topic. I'm honored that the governor of Hawaii, Dr. Josh Green, has joined us today to share his experiences addressing both measles and COVID-19. He's not only a dedicated public service, but he's also a physician who led his state, Hawaii, during the pandemic. And I'm thankful to him for being here today. And I look forward to the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. I think people understand why you didn't join me in my oversight request. There's over 70 letters that were not responded to. Again, I haven't uncovered yet what they were trying to hide, but our intention is to do so. You did mention the irrefutable fact that these injections save lives. I would enter into the record a recent study by Raphael Lataster, who does a pretty effective job of rebutting one of those studies from Watson et al. But put in the record, and again, will allow the public, the American people who are watching this hearing, decide based on what testimony is, based on what's been entered in the record, based on our report. It is the custom of this, the full committee and the subcommittee, to swear in witnesses. So if you all rise and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give before the subcommittee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. Our first witness is Dr. Peter McCulloch. Dr. McCulloch is an internist, cardiologist, and epidemiologist from Dallas, Texas. He is broadly published with over 700 citations in the National Library of Medicine. He has testified multiple times in the U.S. Senate, U.S. House of Representatives, European Parliament, and many state capitals concerning public health policy. Dr. McCulloch.
Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Blumenthal, subcommittee members, it's an honor to present my insights, my analysis, my clinical experience on this very important topic. The first time I testified at Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, before a word came out of my mouth, Minority Senator Gary Peters said, what America was about to hear was misinformation. I didn't even know what he was talking about. I had never heard that term before.
He didn't even know what he was
in
talking
academic
about.
medicine or in important deliberations. That's November 19th, 2020.
Yeah,
What was he?
because all I knew is that you were going to disagree, and so it was just automatically misinformation. He probably didn't even know what you were going to say. So, yeah.
Doing? He was using an old communist propaganda technique. He was attempting to gain leverage over me before a word ever came out of my mouth. We should never have our public servants ever try to gain leverage over anyone who is coming to Washington to help the nation on an important issue. As introduced, I'm an internist, I'm a cardiologist. I believe I'm the most published individual who's ever testified on matters related to COVID-19 in any of these hearings. I've seen and examined more patients. I've examined more data, and I'm one of the most published people on the topic in the world. And as a cardiologist, I can tell you, my role in this was to fight disease, preserve life, and above all, do no harm. Do no harm. Now, the topic today is myocarditis or heart damage from the COVID-19 vaccines. I'm a cardiologist. I know the topic well. I've examined thousands of patients with this problem. Thousands. Before the pandemic, I had 2 patients ever with this problem. There's 1,065 papers in the peer-reviewed literature on COVID vaccine myocarditis. So let me summarize them for you. The first one that came on my radar screen that was alarming came from Washington University in St. Louis, August 18th of 2021. The first author is Verma and colleagues, New England Journal of Medicine. 42-year-old man comes into Washington University Hospital with vaccine myocarditis. The infection's ruled out. It's the vaccine. He's in the hospital. This is one of our best hospitals in the United States. He dies 3 days after taking Moderna. They can't save him in the hospital.
Say, Dr. McCullough, move the microphone just a little bit away from you.
Then one was reported from Korea by Choi and colleagues. This is now a younger man. Just a few days after Pfizer, he comes in the hospital. He dies within 8 hours of being in the hospital. I can tell you, I'm a cardiologist. That doesn't even happen with heart attacks. He dies within 8 hours. I examined all of the slides and the images that the Koreans had showed us. It looked like somebody took a blowtorch to that heart. It was so completely fried with inflammation. His heart was destroyed. These cases, which were widely known at the time, should have gotten everyone's attention. Everyone should have been laser focused on this. We should never have someone die after taking a vaccine that's directly caused to the vaccine. Then Gill and colleagues, Connecticut, published in Archives of Pathology, 2 boys, aged 16 and 17, who die a few days after taking Pfizer. These are teenagers. They're found dead at home by their parents. They're absolutely horrified. They request an autopsy. They call in University of Michigan and University of Minnesota to look over what are they finding at autopsy. Conclusion, it's Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine myocarditis, unequivocal. These are autopsy-confirmed cases. So for all the mothers in the room, how would they feel if they found their children dead after taking a COVID-19 vaccine? This is in the peer-reviewed literature. This is not misinformation. Everyone should be paying attention to this. This is not conjecture. This is in the peer-reviewed literature. So we started to ask ourselves, what is going on? Turns out that Pfizer and Moderna and Janssen are the genetic code for the spike protein. The spike protein is the damaging part of the virus. The spike protein is loaded into the body and it causes tremendous damage in some. Acute myocarditis appears to have some genetic predilection, and all of the vials of the vaccine are not the same. But I can tell you, I'm concerned that until the vaccine
Thank you very much, Jess. I appreciate it.
There will be cases of acute myocarditis. And to finish, we've had 216 vaccine deaths this year alone. So if the vaccine campaign continues, we have to look at what are we getting out of it now, 4.5 years of the campaign, and how many more people will die. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. McCullough. Our next witness is Dr. Jordan Vaughn. Dr. Vaughn is a physician and clinical researcher in Birmingham, Alabama. As owner and CEO of MedHelp Clinics, Dr. Vaughn has directed his organization to the leading edge of early outpatient treatment of COVID-19 for his patients and greater Birmingham community. Dr. Vaughn has treated over 4,000 long COVID and COVID vaccine injured patients. Dr. Vaughn.
Thank you. Chairman Johnson and Ranking Member Blumenthal, thank you for having me. I'm going to dovetail a little bit off what Dr. McCullough said. And one of the things that, as a clinician who also had about 200 people working for him and actually seeing about 170,000 patients a year, when COVID came along, I had to really figure out how to not only help my staff and make sure they're safe, but also help the patients that my organization was responsible for. And that really made me dive into understanding the pathology. And what I came away with was understanding that the spike protein, the S1 subunit specifically, is not a benign protein. It triggers inflammation, it disrupts endothelial barriers, it induces fibrin resistant to breakdown, and it promotes a lot of amyloid aggregates, which is what I research. These effects impair oxygen delivery, damage blood vessels, contribute to clotting pathologies that manifest with a lot of the symptoms that we're seeing in the long.
You disagree with Blumenthal. That means it's automatically misinformation. Forget all these fancy terms and facts. You know, you're politicizing the science, sir.
COVID and vaccine injured, which to this day is a huge amount of people. We're talking upwards of 10 to 15 million people in America that are being affected by the consequences of COVID in the long form or vaccine injury. And the typical symptoms are things like heart racing, brain fog, shortness of breath, and post-exertional malaise. In my clinic, I actually use immunofluorescent microscopy to be able to actually see what's going on in the blood and look for these amyloid aggregates. Some as young as teenagers that are unable to stand. Others are previously active adults suffering small strokes without typical identifiable causes. These are not abstract theories. They are the lived realities of my patients in Alabama and beyond. The mRNA injection, heralded as a solution, introduced a novel mechanism, lipid nanoparticles delivering modified mRNA that instructs the cells to produce a stabilized spike protein. Unlike traditional vaccines, this approach resulted in uncontrolled production of the spike protein for an unknown duration and distributes it widely across organs, including the heart, brain, and vasculature, and ovaries and testes. The actual EMA, their assessment of Comirnaty, which is Pfizer's vaccine, noted biodistribution beyond the injection site, contradicting claims that the vaccine stays in the arm. And a recent groundbreaking study using single-cell precision nanocarrier identification revealed LNP accumulation in the heart tissue of mice with adverse proteomic changes in immune and vascular proteins, raising concerns about the cardiac complications that dovetail with what we were seeing when we were looking at the COVID-19 vaccine myocarditis. I will tell my first encounter with a vaccine injury came in winter of 2021. 69-year-old man from Alabama presented with unexplained shortness of breath. He was a patient of mine. He really had no other reason that he had this shortness of breath. And after the second Pfizer dose, he actually had significant shortness of breath. I couldn't figure it out in a sense because it would typically be that he had a pulmonary embolism, but empirical anticoagulation and antiplatelet therapy brought rapid improvement. This case prompted deeper investigation that the spike protein's ability to induce fibrin that's resistant to breakdown, activate platelets irreversibly, and damage the inside of our vessels that run to every part of our body and every organ, explained his symptoms and those of thousands more since. I have treated approximately 4,000 patients suffering from long COVID and vaccine injury, or both. Many were young and previously healthy. For those with vaccine injury, trust in public institutions has been shattered. Many were coerced under the August 2021 federal mandates, despite legitimate hesitations due to prior infection or personal health risks. They knew their body better than the agencies. Now disabled, they are dismissed or ignored by the systems that mandated their compliance. The myocarditis signal is also a big thing. This spring of 2021, a clear safety signal emerged. Myocarditis in young males linked to mRNA vaccines. The Department of Defense confirmed cases of rare heart inflammation, and peer-reviewed studies later detected circulating spike protein in post-vaccine myocarditis cases. Autopsy findings have confirmed fatal vaccine-induced myocarditis. Yet federal authorities accelerated licensing and mandates, sidelining concerns. The CDC's hesitation to issue a health alert on myocarditis, and the FDA's former CBER director promoting vaccines on social media crossed a line from oversight to advocacy. This was not regulation, it was endorsement. Informed consent is the foundation of a patient-physician relationship. Absent the regulators providing that information, that relationship is irreparably harmed, and the practice of medicine will continue to suffer. In closing, I urge you to stop blindly following the science. Science does not lead anywhere. It is an observer, measurer, and descriptor. It must inform leadership, not replace it. When leaders hide behind the science to justify policy, they abdicate responsibility. We need leadership that humbly engages with data, listens to patients, and actually acts with courage.
Who needs data when you have a priestly class called the science? You think science means empiricism, sir, you fool. No, it's this ambiguous thing that's kind of like Zeus that you're just supposed to blindly follow and trust the priests for. That's all. How dare you politicize this subject by suggesting things like informed consent? That would require accountability on the part of the priests. How dare you?
Welcome your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Vaughn. Next witness is Dr. James Thorpe. Dr. Thorpe is a board-certified obstetrician gynecologist and maternal fetal medicine specialist with over 44 years of clinical experience. As U.S. veteran and widely published physician, he has testified internationally, served as a journal peer reviewer, board member of the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, and examiner for the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Dr. Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My patients, I focus on the most vulnerable patients, pregnant women and preborn. It is difficult to conceive of a more egregious breach of medical ethics by the government-controlled medical industrial complex than the promotion of COVID-19 vaccines to pregnant women, thereby, through transplacental transfer, effectively vaccinating their unborn and newborn children. This campaign was not accidental. It was calculated. Pregnant women were targeted deliberately for two reasons. First, women are the primary decision makers of health care across the human lifespan, a known marketing principle. Number two, pregnant women are the most vulnerable patients. If they could be convinced that the vaccine was safe and effective, it would imply that it was safe and effective for everyone. From the outset of the pandemic, this vaccine campaign was never grounded in biological science, but rather in behavioral science, specifically the manipulation of public perception through influence, fear, and persuasion. The federal government outsourced much of this psychological operations to NGOs which disseminated emotionally charged and misleading messaging. These entities falsely assured pregnant women that the vaccines were proven safe and essential for maternal and fetal newborn health, despite the fact that early evidence indicated quite the opposite. Pregnancy itself was protective against COVID-19 maternal mortality. Dr. Jay Winston, an initiative director at Harvard School of Public Health, described the government's vaccine marketing approach in a 2020 CBS News interview. He explained that the strategy was to, quote, go for the low-hanging fruit, those easiest to pick and harvest, end quote. And the fruit, in quotes, tragically, were pregnant women. Only this deception was institutionalized in the now infamous Shimabukuro study published on April 21st, 2021 in the digital version of the New England Journal of Medicine. 21 authors claimed the miscarriage rate was 12.6%, but the raw data revealed an 82% miscarriage rate in women vaccinated during the first trimester. This figure mirrors the effects of chemical abortion drugs such as RU-486. Also, in the same journal edition, on the same day, an op-ed appeared by CDC Director Rochelle Walensky and journal editor-in-chief Eric Rubin. These publications were riddled with conflicts of interest and deliberate misrepresentations intended to coerce pregnant women into taking vaccines. Subsequent studies have also claimed that COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective during pregnancy and have been rebuked by respected researchers. These publications are fundamentally compromised by serious conflicts of interest, ranging from biased funding sources and institutional mandates, and even threats to their medical licenses and board certifications. Between 2020 and 2022, pharmaceutical companies paid $1.06 billion to reviewers at leading medical journals, the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, Lancet, and BMJ. thus corrupting the peer review process. At least 6 existing studies, 3 from CDC, FDA, and 2 from Pfizer, revealed major breaches in safety signals for COVID-19 vaccines and pregnancy.
I wonder how they justify that legally. Like, you give a bunch of money to reviewers. What's even the pretense for that? How is that not just outright bribery? How do they even hide that? That's amazing.
These findings were ignored. Conversely, countless independent researchers with no conflicts of interest published findings that contradicted the false narratives and the pharmaceutical industry narratives, only to be rewarded by persecution, censorship, and threats to their medical licenses and board certifications. This is not hypothetical. It happened to me. On February 8th, 2025, our team of researchers published a peer-reviewed study in Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law. We identified 37 adverse pregnancy outcomes significantly associated with COVID-19 vaccine, including miscarriage, stillbirth, birth defects, cervical insufficiency, premature ruptured membranes, preterm birth, and death of the newborn. Lin and colleagues in a major journal publication documented that the COVID-19 vaccine traverses the placenta, enters the fetal blood, and bioactively produces spike protein in the placenta and the lining of the uterus. Recently, animal studies revealed the mRNA COVID vaccine causes the destruction of 60% of the ovarian reserve in rats. This catastrophic public health failure was financed with taxpayer dollars and channeled through federal agencies to medical gatekeepers such as the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, ACOG, the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology, ABOG, and the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, SMFM. These organizations have abandoned their ethics and responsibilities to physicians and patients and must be held accountable. I urge the government to immediately halt all funding to these entities and to end every promotional campaign that coerces or recommends experimental mRNA therapies to pregnant women. This must stop now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. Our next
Yeah, I wanted to clap
next
at the end
witness
of that.
is Dr. Joe Walskog. Dr. Walskog is an orthopedic surgeon originally from Wisconsin. He experienced an adverse event after his Moderna COVID-19 injection that he received on December 30th, 2020. He has subsequently been diagnosed with transverse myelitis, an unspecified autoimmune disorder, and autonomic dysfunction. He is medically retired. He is now co-chairman of REACT 19. Dr. Walskog.
Thank you, Senator Johnson, Senator Blumenthal, and the subcommittee for inviting me to testify on the development and safety of the COVID-19 vaccines. I am Joel Walskog, a board-certified orthopedic surgeon, now medically disabled after 1 dose of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. Before the pandemic, I enjoyed a successful practice in Wisconsin, performing over 800 major surgeries annually. Trusting my health authorities, my practice followed CDC COVID-19 guidelines, delaying surgeries, and even temporarily closing. I proudly elected to get vaccinated, and within a week, I developed leg weakness, numbness, substantial balance loss, leading to falls, including one while treating a patient. Diagnosed with transverse myelitis, a spinal cord lesion at T8, T9, I was stunned that my providers dismissed any vaccine link, despite news of similar cases halting the AstraZeneca trial in the UK. 4 years later, while I can walk, I have been diagnosed with dysautonomia and an undefined autoimmune disorder, both debilitating conditions affecting multiple body systems. I remain medically retired. The career I loved and worked so hard for is now gone. In 2021, federal health agencies assured Americans that the COVID-19 vaccine trials were rigorous and closely monitored with rigorous post-marketing surveillance. They also claimed a robust safety net that would handle what they said were rare and mostly mild.
To be blunt, I can think of very few things that would be more redundant than post-marketing analysis. I mean, after you're already making money off the product, who's actually going to want to admit that the product isn't working or doing damage? I mean, honestly, what's the point of having post-marketing analysis? That just seems... Of course that didn't work, obviously.
Injuries with monitoring, follow-up, and financial aid. After my own vaccine injury, I learned the hard way that nothing could be farther from the truth. In my own battle to restore my health, I could not find a single reliable source of information from the CDC, from the FDA, or the NIH. Further, answers did not come from medical teams, the media, or even medical journals. Rather, the answers were being pieced together by tens of thousands of vaccine-injured patients, huddled together in social media-based support groups who are constantly fighting for their right to simply exist. You will hear today a great deal about myocarditis, maternal-fetal complications, and blood clotting disorders after the COVID-19 shots. I hope to talk more about the neurological adverse events to the COVID vaccines. These are the most common adverse event to the COVID shots. I am now co-chair of React 19, which is a national, science-based, non-political, nonprofit that represents over 36,000 Americans seriously injured by the COVID-19 shots. Our mission is to provide financial, physical, and emotional support. This gives me a unique perspective to share the collective experience of those who have been harmed, not just by the COVID-19 vaccines themselves, but also by the U.S. government. React 19 surveyed our 36,000 members, asking if the FDA takes vaccine injuries seriously. 100% said false. Not even one person voted favorably. The vaccine injured share a uniform story. We did our duty for our country, became injured, disabled, or died. We further reported to VAERS and VSafe, repeatedly contacted our elected officials and applied to the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program, or CICP, only to face silence from the VAERS, no response from VSafe, ghosting by our own representatives, and a 98% rejection rate from the CICP. The many cries for help were ignored. Some were studied at the NIH in a program under Dr. Fauci, where they were diagnosed with vaccine complications, but never disclosed to the public, despite promises that the NIH would do so. Privately, the agencies said neurological conditions needed early recognition and treatment, while publicly they remained silent and often denying that they were even treating vaccine injuries. Rather, they promoted boosters and high safety claims, while the White House directed social media to censor, quote, true stories of vaccine injury, end quote.
But see, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but this is what's going to happen when you have this kind of in real time studying of the situation. Because who's going to hold these people responsible? I mean, we're having a congressional hearing. What's going to come of it? What's the Senate actually able to do? They can't enforce the law. So there's no incentive for these people to tell the truth. There's no threat if they lie. So when they don't make money off the product or the product has adverse side effects, they're not going to say anything. Why would they? Honestly, why would they? And I don't fault this guy, but there's a narrative that these institutions are designed to counterbalance or prevent this sort of thing, but it's not. There's not. There's nothing like that. These guys can get away with lying, and there's not going to be any legal repercussions, so far as we can tell, at least not yet. But in any case, I mean, the Senate can't do anything. They can just hear the stories. So what's actually going to be done about this? Who knows? Maybe Trump could do something, but what law is there that says this is illegal?
Relegating NIH confirmed injuries into silence. That silence by health authorities, elected representatives, and even our White House has resulted in even more severe health outcomes and worse for many, death. The PrEP Act shields drug companies from injury liability and strips Americans of their constitutional right to due process and jury trial. This liability shield places the responsibility squarely on the U.S. government to address this crisis. Our constitutional rights must be replaced with effective safety monitoring and compensation. Today, these programs are dismal failures. Congress must urgently reform these failing systems or remove itself as a middleman and repeal the PrEP Act. An analysis of clinical trial data showed that for every 800 people vaccinated, one suffers a serious adverse event. We are here today to end the silence for the 1 in 800. It is time to stop politicizing vaccine injuries and start building meaningful recognition, research, competent care, and fair and just compensation. At React 19, we say we've had negative reactions, but we're about seeking positive actions. I will not stop until these humanitarian goals are met.
That was very good, but I want to point out that both sides are saying the situation needs to be depoliticized. And guess what that means? It's political. Because politics are life, whether people want to admit it or not. There is no such thing as depoliticizing a topic. You could appeal to people to get rid of their tribal loyalty, perhaps, but they won't. Not usually. So this whole idea of politicalization or whatever, that whole thing is a myth. It's a myth. It ain't. Politics are going to be inherent in everything.
Thank you.
Not inherent, built into everything. Let's put it that way.
Thank you, Dr. Walscock. Our next witness is Mr. Aaron Seary. Ms. Seary is the managing partner of Seary and Glimstad with over 85 professionals. He has handled numerous high-profile cases involving challenges to medical mandates, restoring exemptions, agency transparency, including forcing FDA to release the COVID-19 vaccine licensure documents, and deposing immunologists, infectious disease doctors, and vaccinologists. Mr. Seary.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Our vaccine practice, I believe, which has over 40 professionals, it doesn't represent pharmaceutical companies, I believe is the largest vaccine practice in the world. When we litigate vaccine cases, we cannot rely on credentials or fancy titles. We have to prove our claims with high-impact data and sources. For example, I saw a slide put up that showed 3 million lives were saved from COVID-19 vaccines. The citation to it was to the Commonwealth Fund. If you follow that, that's not a peer-reviewed study. That's a blog. It's a blog.
Very nice,
that used
sir.
a mathematical model to calculate that 3 million lives were saved. So
Old Blumenthal wasn't counting on somebody knowing the citation. Whoops.
With the Senator Blumenthal who said, quote, claims made, I think you meant regarding vaccines, we need to examine the evidence. And that's an example of that. We need to look carefully at the evidence we are relying upon when we are making claims about vaccines. I don't think that if I went into court and I was relying on a blog that used a mathematical model, I would be laughed out of court if I was making those claims about vaccines. But unfortunately, when it comes to promoting vaccines, well, that's what we often see. The underlying data is not typically really carefully evaluated. Claims about what vaccines do when they're positive, because our health agencies are responsible for promoting them, easily made. Claims that vaccines cause any harms or injuries often get ignored no matter how good the underlying data. I also heard that deaths sharply declined in 2021. Well, when you look at all-cause mortality in the United States, deaths in 2021 went up compared to 2020, and presumably most of the most frail, weak among us died in 2020 from COVID. We should have had a reduction in all-cause mortality in the United States. We did not. And those numbers you can't argue with. They're binary. You're either dead or you're alive. You can argue whether the vaccine killed you or didn't kill you, whether COVID killed you or didn't kill you. But it can't argue with all-cause mortality. And we did not have a reduction in all-cause mortality in 2021. We had an increase. And we really need to answer that question. We have sent many letters to our federal health officials trying to get an answer to that. With that said, not only do we need to carefully study the data and science before we go and litigate our vaccine cases, because again, I don't have a MD or a PhD or an MPH, we also need to understand the economic and regulatory framework around vaccines. And COVID-19 vaccines did not just fall into a vacuum. They fell into a very well-developed regulatory and economic framework for vaccines that has developed over the last 40 years. For every product on the market, you can sue the manufacturer for harm, for design defect claims, meaning the claim that the product could have made safer. I mean, literally, look around this room, planes, cars, pharmaceutical drugs, every one. There's only one product in America you cannot sue the manufacturer for design defect claim to claim that it could have been made safer, and that are vaccines. I heard, injections, vaccines. My definition of vaccine is any product for which the government needs to give it immunity from harms. To me, that's what a vaccine is, because some prevent infection, some don't. That's what a vaccine is, meaning it can't survive without that immunity, apparently. Why did vaccines get this immunity, which was provided in 1986 under the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act? Because leading up to 86, there were only 3 routine childhood vaccines, MMR, OPV, and DTP, and they were causing so much harm and causing so much liability that all the manufacturers were going out of business to stop making them. And Congress, instead of forcing those manufacturers to do what every other product manufacturer needs to do in that situation, which is what? Make a better, safer product. Instead said, you know what? We're just going to give you immunity. We're going to make it so nobody can sue you for those harms. And you can keep selling your product to the American public no matter how many children it kills or injures. And the issue is that immunity was not just given for those 3 products. It was given for any childhood vaccine, routine child vaccine that was developed thereafter. I tell you this not to take issue with childhood vaccines, but to explain to you the regulatory framework in which vaccines have developed over the last 40 years. We have now gone from 3 injections in the first year of life under the CDC Schedule in 86 to 29 injections, including in utero, if a child follows the CDC schedule today. Every one of those vaccines, save one, was developed by a pharmaceutical company knowing they would not be responsible for the injuries that are caused by those products. So when you have drug trials where pharmaceutical companies, they care about losing money, they don't want to lose money on their drugs, they often do multi-year placebo-controlled trials before they get on the market because they don't want to end up upside down. They're there to make money. But with vaccine products, because they don't have that financial incentive, they have the disincentive. Almost every childhood vaccine in this country is licensed based on clinical trials with no placebo control, save for COVID-19 vaccine, often days or weeks, up to maybe 6 months of safety review after injection, and are often extremely underpowered. Those trials could never have really confirmed the safety of this product, and my submission to this committee laid out every single vaccine and put them in detail. I will...
That is a very good point. A lot of people will complain about profit incentives, but you get rid of the profit, you get rid of the reason to care. And so the fact that these guys have lost their profit incentive means that they can take shortcuts and there won't be repercussions, legal or otherwise. What happens? There's not a threat of jail hanging over these people. You've just got rid of the profit incentive. So therefore, they're not going to try, which is why this entire system is incredibly sloppy and dangerous.
Since I'm running out of time, I'll just wrap up by saying this. You might say, well, okay, the pharmaceutical companies did that, but why would the FDA allow it? It's because, unfortunately, our federal health authorities are hopelessly conflicted. Congress gave them conflicting structural duties. They're responsible for promoting vaccines and for defending them in the Vaccine Compensation Program. And you also ask them to be responsible for safety. Those conflict. One has overtaken the other. And for the most part, based on our over 2,004 requests to federal health agencies over the years on behalf of our client, I could tell you, our federal health agencies act like partners with pharma. They encourage their inroads. They act basically in the shoes of pharma because when the immunity to liability was given to the pharmaceutical companies, Congress recognized that apparently and transferred all the safety functions to HHS and the mandate for safer childhood vaccines. And by doing so, it's made them hopelessly conflicted. That was a very, very quick way to try and convey the regulatory and economic framework into which COVID-19 vaccines fell into, and why, from the pharmaceutical and FDA's perspective, the COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials may have been robust, and they were compared to childhood vaccines, but compared to drugs or anybody that actually wants to assess safety, They absolutely were not robust. They were incredibly anemic. And as for post-licensure, regulators didn't do their jobs, but really they acted like pharmaceutical companies seeking to cover up harms and avoid reputational damage and financial liability. I hope this hearing can help begin the process of changing that. Thank you, and I apologize for going over on my time.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Siri. Our final witness is Governor and Doctor. I've always found senators like to be called doctor, if they are one. So Governor and Dr. Josh Green. Governor Green is the 9th governor of Hawaii. He earned his degrees in biology and anthropology from Swarthmore College and an MD from Penn State's College of Medicine. Dr. Green served 2 terms in the Hawaii House of Representatives, 3 terms in the Hawaii State Senate, and a term as lieutenant governor, during which he was the state's point person addressing the COVID pandemic. Dr. Green was elected governor in December 2022. Governor Green.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Thank you so much for welcoming me. Thank you, Ranking Member Blumenthal. Thank you, Senators. First of all, I'm coming to you as a physician. When I speak as a doctor, I'm here to say that vaccines save lives, period. I care about
Well, we
saving
already know where
lives.
this is going.
You care about saving lives. Everyone in this room, I believe, cares about saving lives. But I've seen firsthand children dying from the spread of preventable diseases because of vaccine skepticism, because people lose faith. I've seen the lives of some children in one house who are vaccinated.
I don't know how people actually take this sort of thing seriously. It's like the second you go, vaccines save lives. And there's been so much risk and damage from all the people that have been killed because they're afraid of vaccines. Granted, the other witnesses have actually cited specific examples. He will not. But aside from that, what he's actually saying is, yeah, this vaccine might kill some people. It might kill millions of people. But you know what's worse? The hypothetical millions that are dead because of the fear of vaccines, because of the fear of our institution. I can't cite any of these particular people who were killed. I know of no specific examples, except maybe some that I've heard on CNN or something. And I don't even know if those are actually true. There's like whole stories around the ones that even CNN has cited. But we have to think about what would happen if our dear institution was undermined. And so maybe, just maybe, those millions of people who died, maybe we just need to count that as a necessary loss. That's what these guys are actually saying when they make these appeals about vaccinations working and everything else. They're saying we need to take the trade-off. They'll never put it in such blunt terms, but that's what they're getting at.
While children in the house next door who have not been vaccinated die. And we saw a lot of this during COVID. I want to tell you a little bit about my COVID experience as the COVID liaison in my state, a state of 1.4 million people. And let me preface this by saying we worked very closely with President Trump and his team. And then subsequently, as Lieutenant Governor, I was able to work very closely with President Biden and his team, and I appreciate them both. I appreciate that President Trump, using Operation Warp Speed, got us a vaccination in an extraordinary time. We were desperate as healthcare providers. I worked as an emergency room physician.
It should be pointed out, though, that during the time when Trump was promoting this warp speed thing, all the Democrats are going, don't take the vaccine, don't trust it. They were right, but as soon as they got into power, then all of a sudden they suddenly switched their opinions around. So that needs to be pointed out, too.
Virtually every single weekend for 20 plus years, including through the whole pandemic. And this is what I saw. I saw people dying of terrible disease when they caught the Delta variant of COVID especially. I saw people recover better when they had been vaccinated. In Hawaii, we had the lowest mortality rate in the country. We had the highest vaccination rate in the country.
Define better. Define better. And note the inconsistency in what he just said. I saw them get better, not healed. The disease didn't go away. They improved. No way to measure the improvement, but they improved. And our mortality was the lowest in the country. And we had the highest vaccinations. So did it actually save lives, or did it just make it better? Who knows? Maybe he's saying because it made it better, it saved lives. But how would you prove that? You can't even measure the word better. So just note the word games.
People have asked me in the course of the prep for this hearing, well, is Hawaii safer because it's a tropical island?
And I should also take a point to compare this guy's story to what the story Peter McCullough gave. Peter McCullough gave specific examples of particular individuals he'd treated to make his case. This guy's saying it made it better, but he never mentioned anybody specific. He didn't point out anybody that was actually had their lives saved. At most, he's been told this by somebody in passing, but he doesn't know the particulars. Everybody else has a story, except these guys. It's stories versus platitudes and rhetoric. That's how you know they're lying.
State. No, actually, it's quite the contrary. We had COVID coming from east in Asia, where it originated, and west, travelers from the mainland. But we put together programs based on science. Day by day, I counted case after case after case because there was so much uncertainty. And I was able to share in our state where we had infectious disease doctors, where we had extra need for ventilators, where we had extra need for vaccinations, where the rates were lower. And day by day, working with all the healthcare providers in my state and listening to others, not mandating. I'm not a mandate guy. That may come as a surprise to some today. We were able to make sure that we had a science-based response. We put together a safe travels program which tested anyone coming into the islands so that they wouldn't travel or that they would isolate, quarantine if they were positive so they wouldn't spread the disease. And over time, we had the experience that no one else had. We saw death rates constantly lower than all the other states with the single exception of Vermont on occasion. I tell you this because we have to follow science, and I truly believe that we can't politicize science or vaccinations or any of these public health matters. And it's very important going forward. This is
There's
where
that
we should
word
unite with
politicize
one
again.
another. We should heal our country together in this space. Now, another experience I had, measles. I was the doctor that was asked to go to Samoa when they had their outbreak of measles. Why did they have their outbreak? Because they lost faith in the vaccination program. And it was tragic. The Children's Health Defense went there and they scared people. After tragedy, admittedly, it should have never happened. I had children die in my arms who were not vaccinated but died of measles. This beautiful boy was with me and a pediatrician. Dr. Nadine Tansala had a terrible case of the measles, and some of his relatives passed away from the disease. But we went there and we vaccinated 37,000 individuals in 48 hours, and the measles just stopped. And I say this because this is what we have to look forward to in the future if we somehow fall into a place where we don't believe in vaccinations any longer.
Okay.
And we shouldn't.
First of all, I think there's some particulars to that specific instance that undermine his story. But I don't know the specifics, so let's just assume for the sake of argument that he's correct. There's a distinction between the vaccination for measles and the mRNA, and that's the whole debate. A lot of the people on this panel wouldn't even consider the mRNA a vaccine because it's fundamentally different from the measles vaccination. So what he is essentially doing is a bait and switch. He's saying, well, this works with measles, therefore the mRNA works as well, and we have to act as if the mRNA works because it works for measles, even though the technology behind these vaccinations is fundamentally different. So yeah, it's essentially a bait and switch.
Do it blindly. We should study them. We should check for safety. Absolutely, that is essential in science. But these vaccinations save lives. They saved many lives during COVID. In my state, they saved over 10,000 lives. We anticipated mass casualties, which we never saw because we fought this disease with great intelligence and great acumen. I will tell you this. There are lots of things to share today. Protests resonated through the COVID experience in my state. People protested at my home, around my family. But the leader of the protests ultimately, after I was worried that he would catch COVID, did exactly that. Ended up in grave, grave peril. His wife was in the intensive care unit. His name was Witkoff. He later disavowed the protests against the vaccinations after seeing individual after individual after individual be intubated and go into the ICU because he experienced it. And that's what we as physicians see too often. Once a tragedy occurs, and my heart is with everyone who had any kind of reaction to the vaccines that we're talking about or loses a loved one. Of course, we love our fellow mankind, but we cannot turn away from science. So these are some of the things I wanted to share with you today. Ultimately, we have to decide
I just
whether we're gonna...
cannot stop emphasizing the personification of the word science, as if it's this abstract deity that must be appeased. It's a methodology, but we're not going to talk about that.
Be committed to public health in our country. And right now, we are in great peril. It is absolutely my firm belief that vaccines have saved millions of lives over the last 50 years, 150 million by many people's accounts. It's decreased infant mortality by 40% globally. And we have to continue to commit ourselves in this way. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned that as we end up in a politicized discussion, that we will move away from science. We will not trust one another, experts. We will not trust one another, and we will end up in conflict. So what I would say is this. Let's work together. Let's find a way to actually find the common ground to protect our children. Let's find a way to make sure our public health system remains intact, not taken apart by the current approach where HHS is jettisoning many of its people, many of the billions of dollars, perhaps many of the vaccinations. This is our opportunity to come together, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this as the hearing goes on, but I'll say one last time. Vaccines save lives. I've given vaccines, I've taken vaccines, I've treated people that didn't get vaccines, and it's broken my heart when they've passed away.
Thank you, Governor Green. Quick comment.
But no, he makes all these appeals to working together and coming to a common ground solution. But what is his common ground solution? Accept everything. Don't improve the regulations. Don't repeal that law that was passed in 1986. Don't change anything. See, we can come together by keeping the institution exactly as it is. What would he propose instead? He wants to keep all this stuff on the market for fear that people might be distrusting of all vaccines. So rather than comforting the people by improving regulations or anything like that, we just have to pretend like everything's okay. That's his definition of coming together. Keep lying. Let's all participate in the collective lie.
Where anybody on my side of this issue has politicized it. The accusation is always that we're not. You did state, by the way, 10,000 lives saved in Hawaii.
But what does politicization mean? What does the word mean? It means disagree with me. That's all. Nobody could describe an honest dialogue about a particular subject versus the politicalization of a particular subject. Nobody could tell you the difference between those terms. No, it just means agree. It just means you disagree with me, therefore you're politicizing it. That's all. That's the irritating thing about these word games. It's always science is a deity. If you disagree with me, you're politicizing the issue. There's never any distinctions in these terminologies. It's always just veiled accusations behind rhetoric, which is what Senator Johnson is pointing out. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. If you did, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Rumble. We can also be found on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Thank you again very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.